Okay, we're live. Welcome to our Facebook Live today. I'm going to be going over some Thanksgiving decor. I'm Nancy Bronstein. I am a Husqvarna Viking educator, and today I'm going to share with you a few ideas that I've had for decor. And we only have an hour, so there's just two projects done a couple of different ways to hopefully incorporate various machines so that you don't have to have the top of the line machine to do the things that I'm going to tell you to do today. And if you perhaps don't exactly like my style, you will pick up some techniques or little ideas that perhaps you can incorporate into a project of your style. So what I'm going to talk about today is, first of all, I'm going to go over this table runner. And the table runner has a central image, as you can see, that's made in Word Sculpt in the My Sonnet software, our embroidery design software. And it can also be done in Premiere Plus 2 or all of our embroidery software previous versions. And then I'm going to talk about these napkin rings that are kind of matching that you can also make. But before I get started, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping. As we generally start these Facebook Lives, we want to warn you that if anybody asks you for money or for any links in the chat session, that's not us. Our Facebook Lives are always free. And if there's anything like that, just ignore it and don't worry about it. I have a couple of people in the background that are helping me with this Facebook Live. I am here alone in my studio, switching from camera to camera. I'm a one-woman show, but I do have two people in the background reading your comments. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to type them in, and they will alert me, and I will answer the questions as we go along. Also, we are setting up Facebook Live topics for next year. So if there's something that you would really like to know more about, please type that in. We will add it to our list for consideration. So I'm going to start out by showing how to make the design. And it is a design that I made in the 260 by 260 hoop, our new Mega Quilter hoop. But I'm going to show you also how you could make it in, say, a 260 by 200 hoop that would come with, say, the Topaz 50 or maybe one of the older rubies. So you don't necessarily have to have a top-of-the-line machine. But if you want that 260 width, you do need to have the original Applique, the Applique 2, or the Ruby 90. But I'm going to show you how you can make it 200 millimeters in width so that you don't need this wider hoop or the bigger form factor top of the line machine. So to get started, I am going to switch my screen with my assistant's help to show you the My Sonnet software and how you would do that Word Sculpt central portion of the table runner. And first of all, you're going to see this weird screen as it gets hooked up to my desktop. Okay, so now I am into My Sonnet. My Sonnet is our embroidery design software that came out, maybe a year and a half ago now. I'm kind of losing track of time. When you open up My Sonnet, you will see this screen, and the Word Sculpt wizard that I used to create that central pumpkin image is one of the wizards here on the opening screen. So since I know I'm going to use that, I'm going to click on Word Sculpt. And I am going to, first of all, Word Sculpt opened up with one of the sample images. I was going to go and change my hoop size, but I'll do that in a minute. So I'm going to pick my pumpkin shape. I know there is a pumpkin in here. As I scroll down, you see all these different shapes. There's just tons and tons of different shapes. There's my pumpkin. Now, since I'm going to be using a, or actually has about the right size. Since I'm going to use a 260 by 260 hoop, I'll probably change this width to 250 by 2. It's about 250 by 250. And I'm going to keep the outline being a satin stitch. But I'm going to look at the options to see exactly how wide it is. for this application, I would like to keep the 3mm wide, and I'm going to make it slightly more dense by changing it to a 3 rather than a 4. Density is sort of counterintuitive. It gets more dense as the number gets smaller. Then I'm going to click Next. Then what you do is you just add the words in here that you want to have inside your pumpkin. So I'm going to just start adding some Halloween themed, I'm sorry, Thanksgiving themed words. Hopefully spelling them correctly as I'm reaching over my camera to type. And you have to separate each one with a comma, and that keeps them as separate words. So that's good enough. And I generally don't keep them uppercase only because I like it to be just random. And then I'm going to click on Finish. And now I have this sort of full, but not totally full. So what you do next is each of these words has these green squares, and those are actually handles where you can stretch these letters to fill up all of the available space. So over here in our film strip, all those words are grouped together. If I click down here, it will ungroup them, and then I can pick an individual word to work on. Like if I wanted to work on Thanksgiving here. Now I could have just clicked on it, or I could find it over here and click on it. So I'm going to go back to Thanksgiving, and I'm going to show you how you morph these words to fill up all the available space. You just keep playing with it until they get to be where you want them to be to fill up everything. Let's go to cider. Fill this one up. And I think you're kind of getting the idea of how you would fill up all the available space. Now, if you have a lot of extra space, what you could do is click on one of the words, then right-click and click on Duplicate, and you can have an extra one that you could maybe tuck up into that stem there and get that to fill up the stem area. Now I'm kind of not seeing very well what I'm doing there, so I'm going to go down here to zoom to that area there so I can see better what I am doing. So now I'm going to go down here and click on that, and I can pull this out to fit that stem as perfectly as I want to spend time doing. So generally, when I'm doing a word sculpt, I will fill up all the available space. Sometimes I'll pull in a super design to scoot in there, like I could throw a pumpkin in there, which is what I did on my stitch out. So I could put a pumpkin in the middle if I wanted to, because these super designs are not digitized yet. So you can change the shape, the size to whatever, just about whatever you want without losing quality, not without the stitches losing their integrity or not looking very nice. So I've got that pumpkin in the middle, and I could move the words around to have the pumpkin in the middle, or I could just leave that out. So I'm going to delete these and show you what my finished one actually looks like. So here's the finished one that I spent some time on. So I did spend enough time to get all of these words kind of stretched out to get that word sculpt look. And it doesn't take a lot of concentration. Usually I'll, put something on Netflix or something while I'm pulling all those handles and getting everything to fit until I get it done. But, it takes like 5-10 minutes. It's not a big deal. So that was the central image. Now, what I could have done at this point is I could copy this to my clipboard here and then go to New Window. And go into another wizard called Quilt Block. And I have the right hoop size, 260 by 260, I see here. I click next. And because I had copied this image, I can now paste it into the screen here. I'll click next. And now I can decide how I want this area out here quilted. So I don't have to quilt that if I don't want to. I don't have to quilt it in sewing. I can quilt it in embroidery. So I'm going to make the margin, the area between where the embroidery ends and the quilting starts, a little bit smaller by bringing this number down. Then I'll go to next. And I can choose to stipple it. I could choose to make a crosshatch in the background. I could choose to echo. And each of these has further choices that you can make. And when you find something you're happy with, then you finish it. And then you have your quilt block completely done for the center part. So I did not do that. I quilted this in free motion, as I'll show you in a minute. But you could certainly do any of those quilt block designs and have the whole block done in the hoop. Now, if you have a smaller hoop, like you have, say you're doing this on the Topaz 50, what you would do is, to make it the right size, you go into Word Sculpt, and you know that your hoop sizes are smaller. So you're going to have I believe your largest hoop is 260. So let's make this 250 and by 200. So let's make that 190. So then when you go to make your pumpkin, it will be the size that will fit your hoop. And I am not going to go to the trouble of putting in the Thanksgiving words, but now we're we have a small enough pumpkin to go into the 260 by 200 hoop and have it fit. But we're going to have to rotate it in order to do that. So we'll go up here, rotate. And now that fits right into the smaller hoop that is the largest hoop, I believe, that comes with the Topaz 50. Or it would fit on the original Ruby or one of the diamonds, any of the embroidery machines that don't have the bigger form factor, like the Applique or the Ruby 90 or the Applique 2. So because I had, actually, I'm going to switch to, I'm going to close my screen sharing and go back to my camera here. Let's see, where am I here? Okay, so if my helpers would put me back on the screen. There we go. Thank you. So I want to show you the table runner because I'm going to show you what I did next, but I want to also show you the free motion stitching. So this is what it looks like stitched out. And I just did some free motion up there. And as you're making something like this, you're going to see if I can get this in the camera in the right way. Okay, so probably better, easier if I stand up. Okay, that's better. So you have your panel there, and you could do any kind of quilt blocks that you want on the edges. And you could do strips if you have rolls of jelly rolls or whatever you have. I happen to have gotten at a tag sale a bag full of 2 by 3 inch pieces, pre-cut fabric, and I think I have, 400 or 500 pieces. So I have lots of those this shape. So I made my sort of scrappy design like that. You can do whatever you want on the ends. Now, in order to further the sort of pumpkin Thanksgiving theme, I then created my own quilting design to quilt the edges. And I'm going to show you how I did that. And that's also done in Word Sculpt. So I'll show you how I would do that. So I'm going to go back to my my sew net. So I need help from the people on the other end. There we go. So now let's go into the right screen here. So now I have my sew net open, and I am going to create a new design, but it's also going to be word sculpt. So I'm going to go into word sculpt. And I'm going to find my pumpkin. And this time what I'm going to do is, instead of it having a satin stitch on the perimeter, I'm going to go with a triple stitch. And I'm going to look at my options and see what they look like as far as length. 2.0 sounds good to me. Click OK. And then I'm going to click Next. And I'm not going to put any words on the inside. I'm going to delete any words that are there and click Finish. And I am going to make this smaller. Actually, I'm going to go back and repeat that and make it smaller from the beginning. So I'm going to go into Word Sculpt. You can get, if you're in your, I'm going to back up because I was doing that very fast. If you're in your home screen and you want to go to Word Sculpt from there, you can go to Create and click Word Sculpt. And I'm going to change the size drastically. I'm going to make it like 100 by about 100. And click Next and Finish. So now I have my little pumpkin there. If I wanted to make it even smaller, I could go to Modify Design and bring this down by maybe 80%. Make it even smaller. I could go into Encore and maybe make a circle of these and make a design like that. I could make it on the perimeter of my screen. There's all sorts of things you could do in Encore. I did not choose to do that. What I did, let's go back to the home screen, is I have one pumpkin of this size, and I right-clicked on it to duplicate it a couple of times and kind of randomly place them. And then rotated them a little bit so they look like pumpkins scattered on a field, so to speak. Then I right-clicked on one of these, and I'm going to duplicate this one again because I'm going to make it smaller. I'm going to go back up to Modify Design, take it down to 60%. And then duplicate that a few times. Now, it's good to use duplicate instead of copy, because if I copy it, what happens is it creates another copy right on top of the other one, and you might forget that there are actually two of them there. So I like to always use duplicate because when it copies it, it puts it askew a little bit. And I just kind of played around with these and moved them around, and I made actually 3 different sizes so that I filled up my screen, and then I went in, I used that to quilt the ends of my table runner. And if this were done, what I could do to send it to my machine, if I have a Wi-Fi capable machine, so I can click on File, click on Send, and I can send it directly over to my Applique. My Applique is named Emma. Once I click Send, it will be on my machine. But I'm not going to send it because I didn't really take the time to completely do this design. But I'm going to show you what it looks like when it was all done. So I'm going to stop sharing and go back to my camera views. And let's see. This is what I want. So this is my Applique. And to get into embroidery, you want to make sure that embroidery is chosen, and then you click Start New. And I have previously saved this on the machine because I obviously stitched it out. So I just created these random pumpkins on there. And I do want to go over how I went about stitching this out so that I got a quilting-like effect in the embroidery. So when I have this all set up like this, I'm ready to stitch this out. I click on Go. And there's a few things that I change in the settings here. First of all, I turn off the automatic thread cutter. And the reason why I do that is that when you, I'm going to switch my screen. When the machine cuts your threads, what it does is it cuts a little tail, it pulls it to the back, and if there's a stitch very close by, it can catch that thread and make kind of like a thread messy, knotty thing on the back side of your quilt. So when I quilt, I turn off the thread cutter and I cut my own threads myself. I also, when I start the the quilting process in the embroidery hoop, I will bring up the thread just like I would if I were quilting in sewing mode or quilting on my long arm. You know, I put the needle down, needle up, pull the top thread, pulls up the bobbin thread and pulls that out. And you can either then bury that if you're very precise, or you can just trim it real short, and hopefully nobody will be the wiser. So going back to my setup here. So I turn off my automatic thread cutter. Then I would attach my hoop. But before I start sewing this out, what I actually do is I go into settings and I go into temporary embroidery settings and I turn off my deluxe stitch system, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. And actually, let's turn it back on so you can see the difference. I turn it on. In embroidery, the deluxe stitch system uses thread metering in order to achieve the right tension. And if you look at the back side of embroideries, you will see that the bobbin thread is kind of flat. You know, it's not, it doesn't have the look of a straight stitch that you stitch when you're doing quilting or like doing a straight stitch and sewing. Part of that is because you don't want a large accumulation of threads on the back. There's a variety of reasons, but it doesn't look like a straight stitch. It looks very flat. The tension looks different than if you were just sewing. So I want to achieve more of a sewn look. So I turn off the deluxe stitch system, and that will then make it go into tensioning, and I increase the tension because we want that needle and thread to be able to go through your quilt sandwich and have that sewn look both on top and on the bottom. I also will often use not embroidery thread. I will use cotton thread or polyester thread that is not embroidery thread if I don't want the sheen. You know, if it is something that is like this little table centerpiece thing, because of the fabrics, they're kind of like almost like Civil War fabrics, I used a cotton thread because I didn't want that shiny embroidery thread look. And I used the same thread on the top and the bottom in bobbin, and increased my tension because it's pulling that thicker thread through the quilt sandwich. Now, I would not do that for a very elaborate embroidery with lots and lots of stitches, but for just a triple stitch or a straight stitch, it works fine. And I would certainly stitch it out first on a sample quilt sandwich to make sure that it's all going to look the way you envision before doing it on your pieced quilt sandwich with your pieced top. So I'm going to go back and show you what that whole process on the screen again. So I would go into settings up here. I go into temporary embroidery settings, deluxe stitch system, turn that off. So now what we have here is tension. So I'm going to increase that to 4.4. And then I would, when I stuck my hoop in there with my quilt sandwich, I would, as I said before, I would hold the tail of the thread, put the needle down, needle up, and pull the bobbin thread up so that it doesn't, it'll look better on the back if you do that, basically. And then you can stitch out your quilt block with using that pumpkin design that was made on the fly in with the word sculpt images. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring that up is that Word Sculpt has tons and tons of different shapes. So you could use those shapes for all sorts of things, not just for Word Sculpt projects. So that's just another library of shapes that you can use, and they can be made very large or very small. You can use a satin stitch, you can use a single stitch, you can use a triple stitch. So it's a library of shapes that a lot of people don't think about using because they're thinking it's only for Word Sculpt. I guess we don't have any questions yet. So I will forge ahead. Remember, if you do have any questions, please type them in and I'll be happy to answer them. So the next thing I wanted to show you is making some kind of matching napkin rings. Now, these rings, I happen to use our new feature that is, oh, you know what? There was one thing. Let me go back to my table runner because there was something I wanted to show you. Another feature of this, which is like kind of a teaching moment that I wanted to go over. When I placed my pumpkin design on my patchwork, the way that I used it, the method I used to place it on there is part of one of our cell phone apps. So if you have one of our Wi-Fi capable machines, it really helps to do this kind of placement very quickly. And I'll show you what I mean. So when I went to do this, the design is on the right here, right part of the screen. And this is what the icon looks like now for the My Sewnet app that's in our cell phone app. It's one of our cell phone apps. We did have 3 different cell phone apps for Husqvarna Viking, and they have all been combined, I believe, under My Sewnet just recently. And although I'm not sure if all of them have been combined, come to think of it, but this for design placement, that's in the My Sewnet app, and I'm going to show you how that works. So when you open up your My Sewnet app on your phone, which by the way is free on our on any of the app stores, where you get your apps for your phone, either the iPhone store or Android. When you click that open, you are going to see a screen that looks like this, and in order to place your design where you want it on the fabric, you would touch design placement. This screen has 2 other functions. The monitor function you're probably familiar with monitor. When you engage that, you can set up a complicated embroidery design and your cell phone will text you whenever the machine needs attention. Like if the thread breaks or the bobbin runs out or there's a color change. So you can be in an entirely different room while your machine is chugging out a very complicated embroidery, and you only need to run back to when the machine really needs attention. And then the QR code is new. That is a part of the app where you can create a QR code, which is those things that we scan that gives us a lot of information. They look very digital, but when you press that QR code, you can add a whole bunch of information. And when somebody, it will create a QR code, those little blocks. And when you scan it with your camera on your iPhone, it will give the person scanning it all sorts of information that you put in. Like you could put in your name, the date that your quilt was made, all sorts of information about the techniques that you did, or you could put your website on there. There's all sorts of things, fun things you can do with the QR code. But we're going to talk about design placement. So we touch that, and then it will have your machine there for you to choose which machine you want your picture sent to. I happen to have 2 Wi-Fi capable machines, so I would press Emma to go to my Applique that I was currently sewing on. Then it will open up your camera, and you will see something like this if you hover over your project that is in the hoop. So this is a picture of 1/2 of my table runner, and I put the hoop size that I was using, and the app sense the edges of the hoop. If it doesn't sense the edge completely accurately, then you pull on one of these corners and you'll see it move, and you'll know that it has the right dimensions. Then you click on the arrow down here. My pencil just cut out on me. You click on that arrow, and you will then have something that looks like this. And you touch the paper airplane, and then you will see your project right on the screen of your machine. Now, you can't probably see very well, but I had previously loaded the pumpkins. They are in here from the design that I did in WordSculpt. So I can move that around to get the pumpkins where I want it and see what it's going to look like before I stitch it onto my table runner. So the design placement app is a really handy app to have to place things very quickly right on the fabric that you're using. Okay, I have a question. Can I use WordSculpt shapes and create an applique, like one pumpkin in a single stitch, the second layer in a double stitch, and then, yep, you could do that. You could certainly do that. And that's a great idea, because you know that when you're doing, I probably should read this maybe a little bit more clearly. I'm kind of muttering and thinking about what you're asking at the same time and trying to answer it. So this person asked, can I use WordSculpt shapes and create an applique? Like one pumpkin in a single stitch, the second layer in a double stitch, and the top with the satin stitch. So basically, like our embroidery machines create machine applique. When you have a machine applique, you have first a single stitch to place your fabric on top of the template that the shape that you're going to be stitching out. Then it does a double stitch to stitch down your fabric, and it stops so you can cut around that double stitch, and then it does the satin stitch to finish it off. So you could do that. Just you would have to think in terms of getting one laying right on top of the other and having them in the right sequence, but there's no reason why you couldn't do that. That's a great idea. Next one. Is there a value to the app for non-Wi-Fi machines? There's not really a value to that app if you don't have a Wi-Fi machine. We previously had 3 separate apps, and I'm not sure if the other 2 are integrated into the MySewNet app yet. And I'm remiss in not having checked that out because the MySewNet app just came out. But originally we also had a JoyOS Advisor app, and that has a whole bunch of tutorials in it on sewing and embroidery with little videos. So that's good for anybody. Because, when you're going to put on a button or do a blind hem, it's fairly straightforward from one machine to the other. The name of the foot might be slightly different, but the technique is pretty similar. So there's either still a JoyOS Advisor that hasn't been integrated yet into the MySewNet app, or that might be part of the MySewNet app at some point now or in the future. But that portion with the tutorials is good for everybody. Is there a way, another question, is there a way to show this WordSculpt edit in P+2? P+2 has WordSculpt. I'm not quite sure if you aren't aware of that, it's in there, and it works pretty similarly to the way it works in My Sonnet. It hasn't changed. What they did change from Premiere Plus 2 to My Sonnet as far as word sculpt is they gave you the ability to edit your shapes, so that you, with Premiere Plus 2, you could make a pumpkin and you could make it bigger or smaller. But with My Sonnet, you could turn that into a persimmon or a beach ball. You know, you can change the shape totally, or you can create your own new shapes in the My Sonnet Word Sculpt Wizard. So it has this added capability that Premiere Plus 2 didn't have, but you can certainly make those pumpkins in Premiere Plus 2. Another question, will the My Sonnet work with Android phone? Yes, it will. It works with Android, and you would download it from wherever you get your Android phone apps. I have an iPhone, so I think it's the Android store, but it would be that, wherever you get your apps, and it is free. Okay, so I was going to show you the napkin rings. So there's a few different ways to make these napkin rings, and I'm going to show you a way you could make it if you have an Applique 2 or a Ruby 90, the original Applique, the Brilliance 80, the Sapphire. There are more advanced machines. The Diamond has this capability, but not quite as easy to use as it does on the Applique. But we have what's called design shaping. And you could do everything that's on here in a similar way right on the machine without the software, because our machines have some pretty powerful software designing capability right in the operating system. So first of all, I'm going to show you the machine version, and then I'm going to show you what you could do on your machine, in your sewing machine. And then I'm going to show you how I would do this in My Sonnet. And what's really nice is we have this new feature that you create your design in My Sonnet, and there's a new button called Name Changer, and you can enter in a whole list of names, and it will create this file, one each with each name. So you could make your whole family's napkin rings, and very, very quickly. But that's the My Sonnet software. I'm going to show you how you would make a napkin ring right on the Applique 2 in design shaping first. So I'm going to switch to my screen here. So let's get rid of this design. And if I wanted to create a napkin ring right on the machine, I would go into design shaping here. And I would click on the square. Now I'm going to click on the minus sign up here to get rid of this big screen here. And I can just touch one of the corners and pull this and make it bigger or smaller, but you see it stays a square, and I want a rectangle. So what I need to do is unlock this dial down here. While this is selected, that's involved in resizing. And now that this is unlocked, I can make it into a rectangle. And now I'm going to go and actually delete that, because I meant to go into design applique, not design shaping. What I just did, I would have made the square in stitches, but I actually want to do applique. So it's the same concept. Choose a square. And then I'm going to, it's unlocked, so I can do this. And now I have an applique there, and I'm going to choose a narrow satin stitch. Then if I'm happy with that, I touch the check mark. And I'm going to deselect this by touching outside of that square. I'm going to go in, and I would find some sort of image that's Thanksgiving-like. I know that there's some really cute pumpkins in the My Sonnet library. Our embroidery design library that comes with the My Sewnet online subscription. So I'm going to search for a pumpkin. Yeah, I like this one. So I'm going to put that one on there. And I'm going to resize it a little bit. So I'm going to touch that button, scale it, maybe a little bit smaller. Get that up there. And if I wanted to, I could go into my fonts and put a name in there. And pull that up there. And then I would have my napkin ring. I can go into, I'm going to click on the check mark to let the machine know that I'm done with the fonts. And I'm going to go into my stitches, and I could put a buttonhole on there if I wanted. Or once you have this done in embroidery, you could put on Velcro rather than a buttonhole. So that each one you would have to put the name in manually, but I could select all of these and copy it and make another one down here and just get rid of the Nancy. I'm going to delete that and put in another name on that one. So you could make a whole strip of these, and you know, it's up to you how many you want to make and whether you want to put a name in there. And so that's how you would do it right on the machine. Now with Name Changer, it's a little bit more slick, and you can do that in the My Sewnet software. So I'm going to show you how you would do that. So I'm going to go back to share my screen and go into the My Sewnet software. So I'm going to go and get a new window. And I'm going to choose a blank canvas. And this time I'm going to stick with 360 by 260 because ultimately what I would want to do is make a whole bunch all at once. Now, when I did these in the hoop, the way that I did them is I took 2 pieces of fabric, put the wrong sides together, and in between the fabric, I placed cutaway stabilizer. And that sort of sandwich of 2 pieces of fabric with the right sides out and the cutaway stabilizer in the middle gave it a little bit of firmness so it wasn't just floppy cotton. So I have that in the hoop. And then to create my napkin rings, I know I'm going to want to put a super design. What I did is I put the same super design that I used on my table runner to kind of match it. And I know it's in this, there is one, it is in the super design. So I'm going to search for the pumpkin, and there it is. And I'm going to make it about 40 millimeters. That's about right for the width of my napkin rings. So I've got my super design right there, and I need to create the band, you know, with basically the rectangle with the satin stitches around the edges. So I'm going to go into create, and to create a design from scratch, you go into digitizing. Now, one of the things I really love about the new My Sewnet is that the digitizing module and the embroidery module are much better integrated. Right now, I have this embroidery design that I created on the home tab from Super Design, and I'm going to pop into digitizing, but it's going to save that pumpkin basically in another screen. And when I close the digitizing screen, it will plop it on top of that pumpkin. So you'll see that it's just there's a much better flow, basically. So I'm going to go into digitizing, and it's going to open up a digitizing window for me to create the rectangle. So I am not going to use a picture or anything to trace. I'm going to start from scratch. And I'm going to go up to Quick Create. I don't want a pattern fill. I basically just want a satin line to go around my rectangle. And I'm going to choose my rectangle over here by choosing a square. Then I click here and it will create that rectangle with the satin stitch around the border on my hoop. So I'll pull this out to make it the shape that I want. And I can look over here and see the dimensions and see that's about what I would want to have. And then when I'm happy with it, I just close the screen. And now I'm back to my original screen with my super design. So I'm going to pull the I am going to click over here to select the super design and pull it up a little bit. Then I'm going to go into letters and type in my name. And maybe a little bit smaller, maybe 12 millimeters, and apply and get that centered. And so now I need to move it a little bit to the right. So now I have my design here. I could stick a buttonhole or two in there. And the way that I do that is I go into frame and I click over here on the star, which is where you can grab some motifs or different stitches. So I'm going to click that. And then I go over here to select motif to find my buttonholes that are in here. There's many of them. I'm going to go into Husqvarna Viking because I know it's in the A menu that there's stitches, there's buttonholes in there because it's just like on our machines. So we'll pick this buttonhole. You could change the dimensions if you like. You could change the it to a triple stitch, whatever you wanted. Then click OK. Okay, where is my buttonhole? I must have not clicked OK. I must have clicked cancel. So I've got my buttonhole. And I click OK. And I don't know where my buttonhole went. Oh, I have to click apply. Huh. That's the missing element. Okay, now I've got 4 buttonholes because I forgot to change the repeats here. So I'm going to delete this. Always do that. I'm going to change this to 1. And then click apply. And now I have my buttonhole. So I move that over here. If I want to have 2 buttonholes so that I have the ability to make it smaller or larger, I could over here on the screen on the left, I could right click and duplicate, and then I can line these 2 up. Okay, so now I have my template for my napkin ring. If I wanted to make a whole bunch for the whole family, I could click on my name, go back to letter, click on name changer. Embroidery is too large. Okay, this is probably a little bit too big. So let's go back and click on my name and name changer. And then on this list, you just start putting in the names of your family members. I'll just do 3 and click export. And it's going to export as a VP3. You click OK. And this is where it's going to put it. It's going to put it in My Designs, or you could put it wherever you want to put it. And then I'll show you what it created. If I go back into my file manager and go to My Designs, it created 3 different files. So it created, I forgot to name it, so it called it Untitled Larry, Untitled Nancy, Untitled Rachel. So I'll open up Rachel so you see what that looks like. And there's Rachel. So if I wanted to do a whole row of these, I would open up each file and insert it into that original file. So let's see, where's the original here? So here's my original Nancy. I could go to File, then Insert, and Let's change the view here so it's a list. Make it easier to find with details. Okay, and then it should be up at the top. Yes, if I click on date modified, since I just made it, they all come to the top. So let's put Rachel in there. And we'll pull that one up. And I could do the same thing each time. I'm going to be going into my documents, into my design file, and then inserting enough to fill up this entire page. And this looks like this because it is actually a applique. So this is with applique, you know, it's showing you what it looks like with applique fabric, but they all stitch out the same. So that's how you could make a whole sheet of these. And I'll show you again what the end result is. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to my camera with the help of my trusty assistants. Okay, great. So you end up with, if you do this method, remember again, I used 2 pieces of fabric, right sides facing away from each other with a piece of cutaway stabilizer in the middle to give it some stability, because see, it keeps its form. And you end up with, you know, this nice rectangle with your buttonholes. And then what I did is I got my napkins I would be utilizing, and I put my napkin holder around the napkins to figure out where I should put my button. And I'm going to show you how to do that with our button placement tool. Because if I were doing just one button, I would just get out my, I would just, well, I wouldn't get out the, I'd be lazy. I wouldn't get out my button placement foot. But if you're doing 4 or 5, it really makes things faster. So I'm going to show you how that works. So I'm going to, I have previously marked my napkin ring fabric with where I need my buttonhole to be. And I'll put my button placement foot on. And it's kind of a funny looking little thing. Goes on like so. And there is a plastic tool that helps you to place your buttons. However, I, of course, have misplaced that today. And, oh, there's my button. But basically, you're going to take your button and you're going to slip it in here. And if you have misplaced your tool, as I did, anything, you know, a stylus or whatever can help you move the button into place. And you basically, you want the holes right underneath the needle. And I'm going to see if I can perhaps get this in closer. Kind of doubt it, but you never know. Let's try to go in a little bit closer. Sorry, I hope I'm not making you seasick. I'm trying to get this at a better view. That's not much better, but I think that's going to have to do it. So on your screen here, I'm going to go back to sewing. And so I go up on the original screen, I touch sewing, touch start new. And you touch the icon, it's in the A utility stitches menu, and you touch the buttonhole or the button icon. And what you need to do is place your fabric so where you want your button to be, right underneath the button. And then I put my foot down. And then I always, always, always pre-test the space between the 2 holes by using the hand crank. You know, I crank it towards me and make sure that it's going to clear both buttons. If it doesn't clear, what you do And I didn't show you what I was doing. Here, let's go back here. I see. What I did is I was just moving the hand crank. So I saw that the needle's going to go in one hole and then it's going to go in the other hole. Now going back to the screen here, if I found that, say, the holes were further apart, I'd make the stitch wider by touching here. And this is the number of times that the thread is going to be passed through those holes. So I usually do about 10 or 12. When you're happy with your placement, you know that your the width of the stitch is right for the holes in your button, then you can just hit the start button. And if your machine did not come unthreaded, then you would have that sewn down. Let's thread the machine. Let's see here. Now it's not going to use an automatic needle threader because I've got it set up for the buttonholes. So we're going to just thread this the old school way. Of course, when you go to demo things, that's when things that work all the time stop working. Okay, and I think it's the bobbin thread actually is the problem. Okay, so let's see what's going on with my bobbin. Rethread the bobbin, and then hopefully give you a much better demo of how this thing sews on buttons lickety-split. Get that in place. Recheck my placement because I did move the button. You want to make sure it's going to clear. Okay, that looks good. And now I'm going to hit the start-stop button. And I'll do it another time just so you can see how slick it is. And I hit the scissors. So it sews them on very, very quickly. You know, so if you're doing 8 or 10 buttons, it certainly would be a great tool to have. And another thing that's really nice about this is that it has this slider on the side. And what it has is a little kind of like a tongue that sticks out, and the tongue gets thicker and thicker the further you stick that out. And the purpose of that is that if you want your button sewn very tightly to your fabric, you don't want that tongue sticking out. If you want it sort of loose, you stick it out one click. If you're doing something like sewing a button onto a wool coat, you know, where everything's very thick, you probably want a much, this is what creates the shank. You want a much looser shank in order to be able to button a big button into a wool jacket. So this is your shank sizer, you could say. So this is a handy thing to have when you are doing a whole lot of buttons, one after the other. So that's the button placement tool. I did want to show you the piping foot and how to make piping and put it in with your binding. However, we're running out of time, but I'm going to grab this and just briefly talk my way through it so that you can get that information. So as you can see, I put this orange piping, and I think that piping on binding really gives you a pop of color that adds a little something. And I think piping is great on almost everything, basically. And we have 3 piping feet. We have a mini piping foot for when you're using very, very thin cord, perhaps when you would do it on your binding. We have a regular piping foot that would be good for this size piping, as well as a little bit thicker. Then we have a mega piping foot, which is great for home deck where you're using very thick cord to go around a pillow, say. So we have any foot that you need. And the reason why you need a piping foot is that the cord is going underneath the foot, and you're trying to encase it in your fabric. Actually, I have some fabric here. So you start out with, you know, a piece of cord and a piece of fabric that you're going to fold in half. And in order for piping to look good, you have to get the stitch very close to that cording. and I have some pre-made or some cording that I made for my demo that I'm not going to have time to do. And it is very, the seam is very close to the cording, and it makes it very, very snug. And that's what makes the cording look good. You don't want it loosey-goosey in there. And the way that you place it on your quilt in order to sew this together is when you make your piping, you want to make sure that you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So having a quilting ruler, it really makes it very easy, because you place the cording that's inside the piping in that gap on the ruler, and then you run your rotary cutter very quickly and cut it, then pull it, cut some more, pull it and cut some more. But I already cut this. Then you would place it, the edge of your piping, raw edge to raw edge, and with your piping foot, get the groove underneath the piping foot right over the cording again, and it gets it all lined up perfectly. So it's a 1/4 inch all the way along, you know, because that groove underneath the foot, it holds everything in that channel going down. You get your piping all stitched down, then you put your binding on in the same way. You don't have to, the way that you always, you know, the normal way to put piping on, which is to sew it to the front, then turn it to the back. But when you sew it to the front with that 1/4 inch, you're also using the piping foot again, and it keeps it all nice and neat like that. So that was a very quick piped binding tutorial, but I hope that it has given you some ideas for the holidays, that some new thoughts. Like I said, maybe you don't like this table runner, but perhaps what I showed you gave you an idea to do something with word sculpt, or gave you an idea to do something with name changer, or to think about maybe using piping the next time you do binding. So I hope everybody got something out of this. So let's see, any more questions? It looks like, let's see, if you don't have a Wi-Fi machine, how do you use Library Designs if you have a subscription? You have subscription My Sonnet software. Well, if you have the library subscription and you don't have a Wi-Fi machine, you would download the designs onto your computer and transfer them in however you transfer designs. So if you save your designs onto your computer and you transfer them via a USB drive, you would just take those My Sonnet designs and transfer them via the USB drive. Or if you use a cable, you would use a cable depending upon what machine that you have. Okay, I have a question. How do you turn corners with piping? Okay, that's a great question. So if I were doing a pillow, what I would do as I'm turning the corner, if this, say I'm going around a corner here, I would put, four little clips into the seam allowance so that it will curve around that corner. And if you cut your piping fabric on the bias, it will curve even more. So that's how you get it to go around a corner. However, with binding, what I like to do, because I like the way it looks better, is I start my piping off the end here, and I go all the way across, and then I do the same thing going down. So I actually have them overlapping, and I think it looks good because I think it's very small piping. I don't know if you can really see it all that well. I probably can see it better on my picture here. I can zoom in on it probably. So you can kind of see it in the picture here that I just overlap them. And I just like the way that looks. Do I need to, I could go around the corner by clipping into the seam allowance and curving it around the corner. But with the skinny piping, I like the way it looks just overlapped. And I wish I could get a really good close-up, maybe over here. Let's see. Under the light. So you can kind of see how it's overlapped there and then overlapped here. So I like the way that looks. So there's two different ways that you can turn corners with your piping. And so when I do this method on my quilts, I will, on the corners, I have the piping sticking out like this and like this with little tails until I get the piping all the way around. And then before I put the binding on, I'll clip them flush. So that's the technique that I do. And we've gone over a bit here. I think that only other thing I wanted to add was that if you do not have a Wi-Fi capable machine and you see designs that you like on the MySewnet software, you don't have a subscription, you can purchase individual designs. So if you are interested in getting some of the designs in the MySewnet embroidery library, if you go to mysewnet.com, there's a link for the library, and you can search through all the designs, and they will usually have an individual price at the bottom, and you can purchase them individually. And then you can copy them to your USB drive and take them to your computer, to your sewing machine, not your computer. I think that's about it. And so final call for questions. And I guess there aren't any. So I just would wish you all a very, very happy Thanksgiving, and that you all are able to be with family and friends and celebrate this time of year to be grateful for each other. We have a very special Thanksgiving coming up because our first grandchild will be joining us. So happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and happy sewing. Bye-bye.